Welcome to episode 218 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17-Laws Guy. It is June 6, 1937, Paris, or more precisely, Colombes, at the Stade Olympique Yves de Manoir, Bologna against Chelsea, a tournament final staged alongside the Paris International Exposition, the World's Fair dedicated to art and technology in modern life. And the result is not close. Bologna 4, Chelsea 1. An Italian club has beaten an English club to win an international tournament. And in 1937, that means something, because England still sees itself as the home of football. Italy now sees itself as football's modern power. And Bologna, on this day, tells Europe that the Italian club game has arrived. But how did we get here? We start with the professional clock. England legalized professionalism in 1885. So by the mid-1930s, English football has had half a century of professional structure, paid players, league competition, huge crowds, strong clubs, and the habit of believing that the game still belongs to the island that codified it. The continent developed differently. The First World War had shattered a generation of young men and broken social and economic structures across Europe. Then came the Spanish flu, then Reconstruction, inflation, political upheaval, and the unresolved question of amateurism versus professionalism. At international level, the question exploded through the Olympics. Uruguay's 1924 and 28 gold medals showed that football's center of gravity was no longer simply British or even European. The Olympic game had prestige, but the amateur rules no longer matched football reality. At club level, the continent improvised. Austria professionalized in 1924. Hungary followed in 26. Italy's Casa di Viareggio reorganized the game also in 26, and Serie A became a national league in 1929. Spain moved towards professionalism in the late 1920s. Germany, by contrast, would remain tied to regional and amateur structures for much longer. And in the middle of this, Central Europe becomes the great football laboratory. Vienna, Budapest, Prague. Coffee houses, newspapers, coaches, players, and administrators talking football as if it were politics, music, and geometry. Jimmy Hogan carries the passing game into that world. Hugo Meisl builds Austria's Wunder team and helps create the Mitropa Cup. In episode 13, we talked about Mitropa as the first great European club competition, a cross-border testbed for professional football. In episode 52, we looked at Meisl himself, organizer, coach, diplomat, and football intellectual. Then Italy rises. Vittorio Pozzo takes the Danubian lessons and adds Italian steel, structure, conditioning, tactical discipline, the metodo system, and the controversial Uri Undi, South American-born players of Italian ancestry brought into the national team. Italy win the 1934 World Cup at home. We covered that tournament recently in episode 208. Then comes the Battle of Highbury in November 1934. England beat Italy 3-2 in London, but Italy finished the match as moral equals, world champions reduced to 10 men early, battered, and still almost coming back through Giuseppe Meazza. You can go back to episode 14 and listen to that fascinating story. Then Berlin, 1936. Italy win Olympic gold. So by 1937, the pattern is clear. England has tradition, but Italy has momentum. And Europe is politically on edge. The Paris Exposition opens in a world of ideological theater. The Nazi German and Soviet pavilions glare at each other across the Trocadero. Italy is there too, selling modernity, tourism, empire, and national vitality. The fair is supposed to celebrate art and technique, but everyone can feel the political weather changing. And into that atmosphere comes a football tournament. 8 invited clubs, not random clubs. Austria Wien, second in Austria and reigning Mitropa Cup holders. Slavia Prague, Czechoslovak champions. Olympique Marseille, French champions. Sochaux, French Cup winners and league runners-up. VfB Leipzig, German Cup winners. Phobos Budapest, a strong Hungarian side. Chelsea, not England's champions, but a major London club from the world's most mature professional football nation. And Bologna, Italian champions. Bologna are the key. They are coached by Árpád Weisz, a Hungarian Jew and one of the great modern coaches of the 1930s. He had already won a title with Ambrosiana Inter, helping shape the young Giuseppe Meazza. Now he has made Bologna champions in 1936 and again in 1937. This is the Bologna remembered in Italy as Lo Squadrone de Chiamare il Mondo Fa, the great team that makes the world tremble. Their goalkeeper is Carlo Ceresoli, who had missed the 1934 World Cup after breaking his arm, then saved a penalty at Highbury against England. Their midfield includes Michele Andreolo, born in Uruguay, later a key Italian international. The forward line has Sansone, Fedulo, Busoni, Schiavio, and Reguzzoni. Schiavio, remember, scored Italy's winning goal in the 1934 World Cup final. He had effectively retired, but Bologna bring him back for Paris. That is how seriously they take this tournament. It begins on May 30. Austria Wien beat VfB Leipzig 2-0. Slavia Prague beat Phobos 2-1. Chelsea draw 1-1 with Marseille and Antibes and go through by drawing lots. Yes, Chelsea reached the semi-final because football still sometimes settles things with a hat, a coin, or a slip of paper. Bologna beats Sochaux 4-1. That result matters. Sochaux are not tourists. They're one of France's strongest sides. Bologna announced themselves immediately. In the semi-finals, Chelsea beat Austria Wien 2-0, and Bologna beat Slavia Prague also 2-0, with Busoni scoring twice. So the final is set. June 6, 1937, Bologna against Chelsea, Italy against England, at club level, on a neutral stage. Chelsea start well. For the first 10 minutes, reports describe them as lively, technically sharp, and full of dribbling and movement. But then Bologna organize, and in the 14th minute, a Chelsea defensive error opens the way for Reguzzoni, 1-0. 6 minutes later, Busoni scores, 2-0. Around the half hour, Reguzzoni scores again, 3-0. So at half time, the final is effectively decided. In the second half, Chelsea have more of the ball, but Bologna have control of the match. Ceresoli is secure. Fiorini and Gasperi defend with force and class. Andreoli anchors the center. Sansone and Fedulo knit the play. And then Reguzzoni completes his hat-trick. 4-0. Sam Weaver pulls one back for Chelsea. Final score, Bologna 4, Chelsea 1. But so what? Well, this was a shock. Not because Bologna were obscure, but because the hierarchy of football prestige still placed England above the continent. English clubs did not play regular European competition. There was no European Cup, no UEFA Cup calendar, no continental measuring stick. So events like this mattered disproportionately. A neutral tournament, invited elite clubs, an English club in the final, an Italian champion, winning 4-1. That made noise. For Italy, it confirmed the story the 1930s were already telling. The Azzurri were not a political mirage. Italian football had genuine depth. National team, Olympic team, club football. All of it was now competitive at the highest European level. And the link to 1938 is direct. 1 year later, the World Cup is in France. Italy defend their title. The final is played at Colombes, the same stadium where Bologna had just beaten Chelsea. Italy beat Hungary 4-2. Bologna's imprint is there. Andreoli is part of Pozzo's midfield. Amedeo Biavati, another Bologna player, breaks into the side during the tournament and plays in the final. Ceresoli is in the squad. For Bologna, Paris becomes part of the club's golden age. And this is where the story darkens. Árpád Weisz is at the top of European football in 1937. Within a year, Mussolini's racial laws makes his life in Italy impossible. He's Jewish. He's forced out of Bologna, forced out of Italy, and then into exile. Eventually, he and his family are deported by the Nazis. His wife and children are murdered. Weisz dies at Auschwitz in 1944. The coach of the team that made the world tremble is almost erased. Bologna, the machine he helped build, keeps winning. They win Serie A again in 1939 and 1941. Italian football continues into the war years, though increasingly distorted by politics, mobilization, geography, and violence. But international football closes in. By the autumn of 1939, Europe is at war. The great what-if is obvious. What if club football had not been interrupted? What if Bologna, Slavia, Austria Wien, Chelsea, Marseille, Sochaux, and the others had kept meeting every year? What if the Mitropa Cup and these exposition tournaments had grown into a permanent European Club Championship before 1955? Instead, the European Cup has to wait. Bologna's moment becomes a flare rather than a foundation. And Chelsea? Chelsea return home without a revolution. England continues to look inward. The FA remains outside FIFA until after the war. English clubs do not fully enter the European conversation until the 1950s. That is why June 6, 1937 matters. It is not a UEFA final. It is not the Champions League before the Champions League, but it's a signal. A club from Italy, coached by a Hungarian, filled with Italians and South Americans, shaped by the Danubian and Italian football schools, beats a club from London by 3 goals in Paris. Football Centre is moving. In England, it's not fully listening yet. Before we go, 3 things to take away from June 6, 1937. First, Bologna's win was not an isolated upset. It came from a European football culture that had been professionalizing, organizing, and exchanging ideas for 2 decades. Second, the match confirmed Italy's 1930s football power at club level. Italy had the 1934 World Cup, the 1936 Olympic title, and the 1938 World Cup to come, and Bologna showed the clubs belonged in that same conversation. Third, this is also a story of rupture. Árpád Weisz's triumph in Paris was followed by racial laws, exile, and murder. International club football's momentum was followed by war. The football future was visible, and then history smashed it. On this day, 1937, Bologna beat Chelsea 4-1 in Paris to win the Tournoi International de l'Exposition Universelle, the first time an Italian club won an international tournament against an English club, and a forgotten signal that European football's balance of power was already shifting. That is all for episode 218, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Law Sky. Please rate the show 5 stars so we can humor the algorithm and push this show to more listeners. If you have an idea for the show, my email is otd@17lawsky.com. Tomorrow, we'll go to June 7, 1970, and that save. Gordon Banks, Pelé, a header that looked impossible to stop, and a goalkeeper who somehow met the impossible routine. See you then.